Hugh Hewitt in Studio North, joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton, who is chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He is also the conference chairman for the Republican caucus, making him the third-ranking Republican in the Senate. Senator Cotton, hope you had a great Mother's Day with Mrs. Cotton and that you got to talk to your mom. I'd like to say welcome and all that stuff, but I got to get to this Geneva deal. We have been sold a fentanyl rug by China 3 or 4 times. Do you believe them that they're going to actually crack down?
I think we should be skeptical, but borderline doubtful about whether they will crack down. I think that's one reason why the president and Secretary Bessent kept the 20% fentanyl tariff in place, and why we have a 90-day agreement, not an indefinite agreement. President Trump in his first term was the only president to get any movement out of communist China on fentanyl over the last 15 years by largely stopping its direct importation into the United States. But they just shifted tactics, starting to import it through Mexico and now shipping its chemical precursors and even pill presses into Mexico for it to be shipped to the United States. And of course, Communist China is a techno-totalitarian police state. They boast that they can identify any one of their subjects within seconds using their ubiquitous camera systems and artificial intelligence. So they obviously know what major chemical and pharmaceutical companies are up to if they want to, and therefore they could stop it. So I think it's something that we can hope they do, but I don't think we should expect them to do it without continued pressure.
Can we even know if they're doing it? Because it seems to me it's a very difficult trade to track, and the technology to do so in a closed country like China doesn't exist. Do you think we'll be able to verify, even if we want to enter into an agreement with them, that they've stopped the shipment of precursor chemicals?
We do have some techniques that we can use, Hugh. We don't have to rely just on the good graces and the say-so of communist China. We obviously can cooperate with the Mexican government and their security services there. And some of the proof will simply be in the pudding, in the number of fentanyl and other opioid deaths we see in America, and also the amount of trafficking we see coming across the southern border. So it won't simply be a matter of relying on the good word of communist China.
All right. Now, the president is en route to the Middle East right now, and much like his first trip abroad in his first term, his second trip, he went to the funeral of Pope Francis, was his first unscheduled trip, but now it's first scheduled trip to Saudi Arabia. He's not going to Israel. I don't read anything negative into that. As he told me on the show last week, he's as good as any president has ever been for Israel. Do you see any daylight between the president and Israel?
No, I don't, and the president has reiterated that, like you said, recently as last week on your show. Ambassador Huckabee in Israel also made the same point. Hugh, this is largely a economic and trade trip, and there's much more progress to be made on that front in the Gulf nations than there is in Israel, because we are already extremely close trading and financial partners with Israel, more so than we are with the Arab nations. So I'm sure there'll be some security and strategic questions addressed in Saudi Arabia and UAE and Qatar. But this is primarily a trade and finance trip, and there's more work to be done in the Arab nations there than there is with our very close friends and economic trading partners, the Israelis.
Now, Senator Cotton, you'll be driving home, I hope, by the time Patrick McGee joins me. He's going to come on and talk about his new book, Apple in China, which is fascinating. The subtitle is The Capture of the World's Greatest Company. They've been captured by the Chi-Com. It's really kind of disturbing, the degree of dependence upon Chinese permission slips and Chinese consumers that Apple has grown. They're addicted to basically the yuan. Have you followed this development? Are you as alarmed as Mr. McGee?
It is alarming, Hugh. There may be no American company that is more dependent on China than Apple. Certainly lots of companies, unfortunately, have dependencies on China for this or that kind of product or critical input or as an export market. But Apple has basically outsourced almost all of its production over the years to China. And although it has made some noises about trying to diversify out of China, Tim Cook has still been very explicit that Apple depends entirely on the entire ecosystem that Apple has helped, that Communist China has helped Apple create. Wish we could go back in time and make a lot of changes, not just with Apple, but with American policy that allowed American companies to do it in the first place. But Apple is heavily dependent on China, maybe more so than any other major American company.
Well, that's the argument McGee makes. He also makes the argument that what their alleged transfer to India is window dressing, that they're just taking 99% of the production in China, shipping it over to India for a little finishing touch. Then they send it to America and they say it's not a China product. And he persuaded me he's right. Now, I don't know much about this, but you should. I really don't think our leading tech company should depend upon Chinese whim. And they get $70 billion or $50 billion a year, between $50 and $70 billion a year in customer dollars from China, which I was unaware of until I read this book.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with every one of Apple's practices and how they're trying to avoid potential trade battles between the United States and China. But what you say is not surprising. Apple's not the only company that does that. We saw that a lot in the first term of people trying to get out of China. In reality, all they were doing was shipping stuff through a third country. But Apple's dependency, as you say, runs both ways. It's not just they produce so many of their iPhones and devices inside of China, but they have major sales inside of China, the way so many other American companies do.
Like the NBA. Last question, Senator. In news items this morning came a story from thediplomat.com and RAND that China is fielding an array of high-powered microwave weapons that emit electromagnetic pulses capable of disabling electronic systems. According to a RAND report, about 90% of HPM-related patents globally are owned by China-affiliated organizations, indicating continuing advances in precision and power of their HPM capabilities. These advanced weapon systems have become a critical component of China's informatized warfare strategy that guides its overall warfighting doctrine. Is this something you're read up on? I remember in 7 Things You Can't Say About China, you talked about how rapidly they're advancing their nuclear arsenal, but what about the EMPs?
I am familiar, Hugh, with the report and the alarm with which John Ellis carried it this morning, and I think John is right to carry it with some alarm. It's just one more example of the kind of cutting-edge weaponry and technology that China is building, all with really a singular goal, targeting the United States military in the Western Pacific and preventing our military from coming to Taiwan's aid should China try to go for the jugular in Taiwan.
Senator Tom Cotton, always a pleasure